Hello, this is Joe Chambers from 1911university.com, and I'm bringing you another review today for the Patreon and YouTube pages. This is a really unique gun that a client friend of mine sent to me. It is a new in the box 1951 Colt commercial model. In the mid to late 40s, the U.S. government canceled all of their contracts for military issued 1911s. They didn't need any more after World War II to be manufactured. And what they did with the guns that they had on stock is they simply took them, and as they wore out, they refurbished them. So because Colt didn't have any more contracts, they decided to go ahead and start making more commercial models. And this is one such example of one of those guns. Like I say, a client of mine sent me this. He's a longtime friend and client, and it is a new in the box 1951 Colt commercial model. Now, those of you who follow me on Patreon or YouTube know that I don't generally talk about the maker of the gun in particular. I don't name them. But in this case, I wanted to do it a little bit differently because it's so rare and so unique to find one of these guns brand new. I mean, it came with the pamphlet, the original Colt pamphlet that came with the guns in 1951. It came with the original Colt magazine. It's in the original cardboard box, the original Knox Rust wrapper, everything. So let's dive into this gun a little bit. Let's talk about the numbers behind it, and talk about the significance of what was done to these guns and how they were built a little bit, and give you a little insight into the gun. Remember, the math don't lie. 3.14 is always pi. So, of course, with all of these reviews, we have to first establish that the numbers that I'm giving you on the Chambers side of things are how we build guns here at Chambers Custom. This is a sample of one, right? Colt built millions of these guns, and this is just a sample of one. In 1951, Colt built 5,479 of these pistols for the commercial market. It's a 45 ACP. It's actually called 45 Auto, but people shorten it to ACP. And they built just over 5,000 of these, almost 5,500. So to find one of these new in the box is pretty amazing. The fact that the owner of this gun has two of them that are new in the box is even more amazing. The 1911 fell out of favor with the U.S. military in the 1980s. I believe it was 86 when, or maybe it was 89. I think it was 86 when they chose the M92 to replace it. Part of that was because of magazine capacity and 9mm NATO round. Part of it was because the Colts that they had were just really, really old. It's the way of things, right? Technology had improved, they felt, and they wanted a better gun. So they stopped using these, and many of the government issued guns went to be arsenal overhauled and then were sold off subsequently in various programs over the years. And just recently, even more of them have been made available through the CMP. So if you want a government issued sample of one of these, you can get that through the CMP from what I understand. But this is a commercial model. This is what you could buy in the 1950s. These guns sold for a whopping $49.95, which in comparison in 2019 numbers, that's $531.41. So it was still a bargain in comparison to today's numbers. There's a lot of other brands of 1911 that you can't buy for $530 nowadays, and certainly none that you can buy that are at this level of quality. These guns of this vintage, they don't have any MIM parts, they don't have any cast parts. Everything in these guns is bar stock, forged steel, because they didn't even know what MIM was, and castings were highly, highly thought to be cheap at the time. They come standard with an arched mainspring housing, a short steel trigger, a spur hammer, a standard grip safety. On the safety side, they have just a standard bump thumb safety. They have GI sights, a bushing barrel, GI recoil system, and they have a really nice hand polished blued finish. They came with the polycarbonate plastic grips. They didn't have a lowered and flared ejection port, although the commercial model did incorporate what we call the A1 cut right here, which is, get some light on this, which is the scallop right behind the trigger guard. That was part of the first mod that they did for the government for gloved hand use. But very basic gun, very simple, not complex at all to operate. So let's get into these numbers. The bushing to barrel tolerance was 3.5 thousandths on this particular gun, not unusual. And the bushing to slide tolerance was a little over 2.5 thousandths. And it can be turned with the gun and battery. You can turn to bushing. That was how Colt built these guns, so that you could take them down easy in the field. Nothing unusual there. There are many guns made today currently that are considered custom, semi-custom, high-end custom, that are built the same way. The bushing doesn't move any fore and aft in the slide. It's very straightforward. There's no play. And you got to keep in mind that these guns were built by the generation of men that built the guns for the war. So they were very, very well fitted for their time. It's not to say that they were up to our specifications today, but they were very well fitted for their time. This particular gun has a barrel hood gap of 1 thousandths or less, and it has a chamber depth of 0.9025. Now, we've talked about this in the past. We'll talk about it again now and in the future, I'm sure. Standard chamber depth for 45 should be 0.905. Anything between about 0.902 and 0.908 will work fine depending on the hood gap. If you have a 1 thousandths or less hood gap, anything in that range works great. When you get over 908, you start to lose accuracy. When you get under 902, you start to lose accuracy and some reliability, depending on the kind of ammo that you're shooting. But in the case of a box stock 1951 Colt, those particular numbers are exceptional. And to be totally honest with you, they're better than some of the mass-produced guns today. Slide stop pinhole in the frame to the slide stop pin. We have a difference of 3.5, and that's not because the slide stop pin is undersized. It was at 199.5, which actually surprised me. I thought it would be closer to 198, but it wasn't. The hole in the frame is a little bit big. It's at 203, but it's not outside of Colt's original tolerances. So just to keep that in mind. Extractor length was 2.260, which is about 10 thousandths longer than their normal, but again, it was within their Colt specs at the time. The extractor nose does touch the round, as we would probably expect, but there is no fore and aft play in the extractor and the slide when the firing pin plate's installed. That's not to say the firing pin plate is tight, it's just fit properly so that it doesn't allow any movement fore and aft. The ejector length is a 960. It's a standard GI ejector that is necessary if you don't have a lowered and flared ejection port. It allows the round to kick straight up and back over your head, as opposed to out at 3 or 4 o'clock. So nothing untoward there. It's a standard GI ejector, just the way they made them for the war. There's 0% leg contact on this barrel with the slide stop, which was, again, that was not unexpected nor unacceptable. It's actually quite normal, and quite honestly, I didn't expect to have any barrel fit on this gun. They weren't built in the 1950s to have barrel fit. They were built to function in all conditions, and there were very few people, to my knowledge, there were very few people during that time period of building these guns where barrel fit was even thought about, or maybe not even understood fully how to go about doing that or what it would give you. It wasn't until some of the early bullseye gunsmiths started working on these guns that really became an issue, and they started working ardently to make that happen. It does ride the link, you know, as you'll see when I talk about the barrel leg numbers here. It absolutely rides the link. The slide stop hole in the link is 205, which was Colt's standard numbers. Again, they didn't know about barrel leg fit and timing, and they weren't even trying to do that on these commercial guns. They were building a quality piece made of quality material by men who believed in doing quality work to function. And at the time, this was the finest semi-automatic pistol that you could buy, period. Barrel leg height was 88 thousandths. The link bridge was 98 thousandths. So again, it's a link rider. That's the way it was designed to run these guns here. You had a difference of 10 thousandths. It's timed good. It's got good hood gap. It's got good chamber depth, so you're not going to wear out your front lugs in the slide or the barrel. You could shoot this gun tens of thousands of rounds and never have any issues with it whatsoever. All right, let's get into the slide to frame fit, because this is where it gets really interesting. The width measurement side to side, what we have here is we have about 7 to 9 thousandths side to side play. And again, that's very typical on these guns. You can feel it, you can hear it when you shake it. It's not unusual at all. And based on what we've seen recently and some of the other reviews that I've posted, according to some companies, there's no reason to change that in the past 70 years. I happen to disagree with that, but that's the way some companies feel. The up and down height is, our acceptable tolerance total up and down with the stacking is 4 thousandths. You have to have 2 and 2. We've talked about that before. You have to have 2 and 2 in order for the slide to go on the frame. This gun happens to have a total of 10, so we're 6 thousandths over. But again, there are a number of custom or semi-custom guns out there that I have done reviews on and that I'm doing reviews on that are the same or worse than these guns were in 1951. So in 70 years, some people haven't changed what they're doing. The vertical frame impact surface, what we call the VIS, was at 335, which is right on spec with Colt's drawings, and the barrel measures 342, which was not uncommon for these. They wanted to make sure that it was absolutely going to hit, and the way the deck height is on these guns, it allows for that to be a little bit longer, and it works out well. Now we'll get into the trigger pull, and there's going to be some purists out there that go, oh my gosh, you just racked this new in the box gun, it's not new in the box anymore. I've already cleaned all the Cosmoline off the gun. I had to clean the Cosmoline off the gun in order to take measurements. So I've properly re-oiled it so that it won't, deteriorate in any way. And in fact, to be totally honest with you, I'm glad that I did clean the Cosmoline off of it, because what you may or may not know is that moisture, over the course of 70 years, moisture can get on the metal through the Cosmoline. And there were a number of parts on this gun that had very, very slight bits showing signs of starting to want to rust. And so I actually did the gun a favor by cleaning it really well in mineral spirits, which is what we use in our parts cleaner, and getting all that gunk off of there, the rotten Cosmoline, cleaning that all off, and then re-oiling it with a modern oil that will help protect and preserve the finish of this gun. And it's really the bluing on it's beautiful. Once I got it cleaned up, it was absolutely stunning. So the trigger parts, the trigger measures 5 pounds on my NRA certified scales. It has what I believe to be, based on measurements and scale testing, a 20-pound mainspring. The disco is an unmodified part at 1.301. I actually made a mistake when I typed this up for you guys and put 1.031. It's not that short. It wouldn't physically be possible to be that short. It's 1.301. The Sears is obviously an unmodified drop-in part, but again, it's at 774, which is right within Colt's specs. It has a good secondary measurement, which we can talk about in another video. The Hammer hooks are what's interesting on these guns. They're really long. They're at 30 thousandths. Again, Colt was, they had to limit their liability when they built these guns, and so they had to make sure that no matter what you were shooting, the hammer wouldn't follow. And all that to say, it has a very long trigger pull. I would call it what is akin to a long roll trigger pull. And that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable for what the gun was at the time. The trigger pull is smooth. It's very smooth. It feels nice. It's absolutely a shooter trigger pull. A guy could shoot this easily and get good results out of it. Some of the measurements as far as the barrel fit and the slide to frame fit would throw off your accuracy, but as far as reliability, it would be fine. One final thing to note on the measurements is the frame ramp is cut at 31 degrees, which was Browning's standard frame ramp cut, with a 1/2 inch cutter, which gave a 250 radius, and it's 330 deep. Now, we don't do things like that here in the shop anymore because I want you to be able to shoot whatever kind of ammo that you choose to shoot. You want to shoot a 230 grain hollow point? I want you to be able to shoot a 230 grain hollow point. 230 grain hollow points are not going to feed in this gun. Not now, not ever, with the way it's set up. Physically impossible. 200 grain hollow points, probably not going to feed in this gun. But in the 1950s, they didn't have no 230 grain or 200 grain hollow points. They had 200 grain ball. They had 230 grain ball. Maybe some outliner guys were casting their own that they had cut dies for, and they were cutting some wad cutters in the very early stages of bullseye competition using these guns. But it was not uncommon for these guns to simply function with ball ammo. That's what they had. Also of note is the barrel itself is not fully throated like we see in modern day 1911s, because again, they didn't have the kind of ammo that would require that. It was a very basic ball ammo, and there was no need to open up the throat of the barrel at all. It was just a simple little ramp cut on the barrel, and off you went. So these guns were optimized for the bullets that they had at the time, the 200 and 230 grain ball ammo, and they work very well for that. I would say if you're looking at buying a classic Colt, you want a Colt in your collection. Those of you who know me know I'm not a Colt collector per se, but if you were looking to buy a classic Colt for your collection, finding one of these early 1950s guns is a very good choice. This was, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the quality of builds for Colt at that time. These guns were being built by the men who built the guns for World War II, and they were exceptional in their finish work. They were really, really good in their trigger work. The assembly of these guns was very nicely done, and I don't think that you would be disappointed in owning a early 50s Colt 1911 as long as it hadn't been shot out a lot. I know if given the opportunity and the price was right, I would absolutely own this particular one. I don't know if that will be able to happen or not, but it's certainly something that I'm going to entertain, and I'll probably shoot it if I do own it, just because, it's, to me, a gun is made to be shot, and that's what I would do with it. So anyways, thank you for joining me for another review on 1911university.com. If you'd like to see more of these reviews, please subscribe to our Patreon page, 1911 University, where I do mathematical and video reviews of these guns and give you a little bit of history behind them, if there is history to give, and tell you my thoughts, about whether I would own one or not. Thank you for your support, and I hope you have a nice day.